Hey guys, I'm Shelby. I'm a VCUG survivor and the founder of Unsilenced, and I've been told I have the biggest water cup in the world. There are a lot of reasons why our community of VCUG survivors has not existed until very recently. One of the biggest underlying reasons is just the lack of awareness about how trauma impacts both the brain and the body together. To help parents and families better understand why VCUG trauma is so harmful and how it impacts their children, we will be reviewing some key concepts from Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. Whenever trauma impacts the mind, it will inevitably impact the body as well. Because so many VCUG survivors develop dissociative amnesia as a result of this very severe sexual and medical trauma, their brains chose to ignore or repress the trauma. However, their bodies are still experiencing those alarm bells sounding off constantly, telling the brain, hey, we are in danger. And that's what leads so many kids to be in survival mode forever. Or at least until the trauma is resolved, which for kids that don't remember the trauma whatsoever, there's a good chance that they're going to be suffering the effects of that for many years or even decades without any knowledge of the reason behind it. The insidious effects of constantly elevated stress hormones include memory and attention problems, irritability, and sleep disorders. They also contribute to many long-term health issues. This is exactly why so many people, especially children, go on to develop PTSD and even complex PTSD if these effects persist over time. It's no wonder it has this much of an impact on your body. Can you imagine the mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion of being in survival mode all the time? The time to be stunned or shocked at the idea that children can remember super traumatic events from early in childhood, regardless of dissociative amnesia, has long passed. There is valid evidence and research to support the fact that kids do remember, and even if they don't remember on a conscious level, their bodies absolutely remember it. We are doing these children a disservice by not giving them the knowledge they need to resolve all of these issues. There is a disconnect in their brain. They did a brain scan of a survivor 13 years after the traumatic event happened, while the participant was having a flashback of said event. The only side of the brain that had significant activity was the right side. The primitive side, it's the first side that develops in the womb. It's responsible for assessing facial cues, body language, nonverbal communication. It's the emotional side, and as Bessel van der Kolk describes it, it sings to the music of experience. It is intuitive truth. It is the way things are. Now, the left side of the brain in this poor woman was completely shut down, and the left side of the brain is responsible for facts, statistics, logic, making rational decisions, executive functioning skills, knowing what's what. It's also the side of the brain where the Broca's area is, and that is the part of the brain responsible for literally taking thoughts and feelings and being able to equate them with words. When someone with PTSD is triggered or in a flashback, they literally are robbed of the ability to put what they need or feel or want into words. They cannot describe it. And that is why so many survivors of extremely traumatic events have so much trouble simply reaching out for help or even helping people understand how they feel or what they might need. All right, bear with me. The way PTSD affects the brain in general is by taking a memory, but instead of integrating it into the rest of the person's long-term memories, it can't do it because the memory is fragmented. So all the person retains are going to be sights and sounds and smells and sensations that they might have experienced or felt while the trauma was happening. However, they cannot piece this together into a cohesive narrative so it can be just put where it needs to go and move on with their life. Their brain can't do that. That's an issue in itself. But imagine how much worse that would be if, one, you were a child in early development stages, and two, you had literally no conscious memory of the event even happening. The sad reality is that so many VCUG conductors operate under the careless and honestly negligent pretense that kids are just not going to remember this happening to them. That could not be further from the truth. And if you require any sort of convincing, Bessel van der Kolk can help me out with this. It does not matter whether the memory is fragmented by PTSD on the conscious level or the unconscious level, the impact is the same. Being traumatized means continuing to organize your life as if the trauma was still going on, as every new encounter or event is contaminated by the past. After trauma, the world is experienced with a different nervous system. The survivor's energy now becomes focused on suppressing inner chaos at the expense of spontaneous involvement in their life. These attempts to maintain control over unbearable reactions can result in a whole range of physical symptoms, including chronic fatigue and autoimmune diseases. This explains why it's so critical for trauma treatment to engage the entire organism. What he means by that is that while talk therapy is a wonderful thing, it does have limitations. For example, survivors of VCUG often have to undergo some form of trauma therapy to truly heal and resolve these underlying issues. What I really hope and pray that parents and caregivers and families take away from this video is the simple fact that kids who undergo a VCUG, regardless of how much or how little they remember, will be drastically impacted in every way. In every way. Physically, emotionally, psychologically, academically, professionally, personally. And it's so essential to also understand that their brains are not developed. I feel like we throw that out a lot, but it's important to actually consider the implications of it. Secure attachment is absolutely crucial to healthy development of children. And this starts to matter as soon as the child is born. Their first breath, it matters. That physical connection, that physical attachment, and that security, the way they're looking to mirror their mom is so important. That lays the foundation for not just the child's health, but their lifelong identity. Back to the VCUG survivors who are experiencing these bodily impacts and these adverse health effects with no memory and no knowledge of why. Children who don't feel safe in infancy have trouble regulating their moods and emotional responses as they grow older. By kindergarten, many disorganized infants are either aggressive or spaced out and disengaged, and they go on to develop a range of psychiatric problems. Does this kind of biological dysregulation automatically reset to normal as a child matures or is moved to a safer environment? So far as we know, it does not. It does not. That means that even a child from a wonderful, loving family who undergoes a VCUG and develops dissociative amnesia, that child will continue to lead a debilitating quality of life. And they will ultimately miss the potential of who they could have been if they were given the tools they needed to resolve this underlying issue. One of Besser van der Kolk's patients shocked him by having no memory that she was ever sexually molested as a child, and yet that event was reflected in other behaviors such as creativity and drawing and journaling. She chronically behaved as if the world were a terrifying place. Yet even though she'd drawn a girl who was being sexually molested, she, or at least her cognitive verbal self, had no idea what actually happened to her. Her immune system, her muscles, and her fear system all had kept the score, but her conscious mind lacked a story that could communicate the experience. She reenacted her trauma in her life, but she had no narrative to refer to. This is a very common problem that many VCUG survivors struggle with, is growing up for many years, exhibiting and experiencing these debilitating psychological and physical symptoms, but not having anything to point at and say, that makes sense. That's why this is happening. This is how I regain control over my life and over my body. They don't have that. And I cannot stress enough that there is evidence that such symptoms do not improve as the child grows. If anything, it worsens as they develop into adults who are confused and frustrated with their inability to be a contributing member of society while battling so many mental illnesses and conditions. This is exactly why these kids are way more prone to get older and be extremely susceptible to abuse, to be people pleasers, to be excessively compliant, to have academic and social struggles, understandably, given that one, they view everything they encounter as a threat, and two, having PTSD for so long, of course their memory probably isn't to the standard it should be. You try getting a college degree with PTSD brain. It's not easy. And this entire time, these kids have no idea. If you really stop and let it sink in just how long VCUG survivors, especially those with dissociative amnesia, have to endure these unexplainable symptoms, it really checks out that you're gonna hit a point where you say, I don't have a reason, it must be me. I'm the problem. I'm the defective one. I'm the one who doesn't fit. Something isn't fitting. And if it's not anything around me, then it has to be me. I would love nothing more than to make a 3-hour video about this book, but out of respect for y'all's time, I will be signing off now. Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to keep up with us on social media. Go like us on Facebook to stay informed about the real risks of VCUGs.